So I'm ready to start trying to wire up this radio. What I'm going to do is hook up all the connections I can in the wiring harness before I put the radio in, and then all I'll have to do is plug the plug in the back of the radio. I had these set up, you know, the speakers are polarized. In other words, there's a plus and a ground. So I had these set up so that the connectors are such. This is something I usually do. I can tell on this connector that goes to the speaker, that's the plus, because that would leave a shielded negative in case this came, shielded positive in case this came out. So, first thing, one of the considerations that I had was originally I pulled the constant battery power to keep the preset channels in off of the wire that went to the cigarette lighter, and I didn't see this last week when I was down here, but there's a significant chunk of this wire that is bare, so that's going to have to be taped. Now, because I pulled this off of the cigarette lighter, which in this car was wired to be hot all the time, that kept my orange wire from my radio plug, kept my stations dialed in. Thinking about that, I want to have this cigarette lighter plug be powered, because now you have GPS units, you have cell phones you want to charge, and things like that. But in thinking about it, especially because this is a Corvette that's not driven all the time, I don't want to have a situation where I can park the car with the GPS unit on and the GPS continues to take power from this lead. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wire the cigarette lighter into my relay that is only going to provide power whenever the ignition is on. So I am going to, it looks like the ground wire from, that looks like that thing's been worn at too. I don't know what these things were rubbing on, but man, it's amazing I didn't short anything out. But there's a box here, I'm not quite sure what it does. Filter and fuse box. There, now I know that gets power, and I plugged it into the original power from the original radio, and the ground, which is pulled out, goes into that same plug. Make sure I get it in there. Maybe it wasn't in there good. I'm going to make sure. Maybe I'll take that tape off and redo it. But in order so you're not watching me just play with black tape, I'm going to shut the camera off. I'll untape the original connector from the radio so that I can make sure that that ground wire is securely plugged into that. And then I will also tape up that original cigarette lighter wire so that it's not going to short out on anything. And then I'll be back. So what I have here is the radio wiring harness. This box has filters and fuses in it. These connect to the original power. I'm sorry, these two connect to the original power from the original radio. This connects to the hot lead that's hot all the time to retain the preset channels. And then this yellow one isn't used in this car because it doesn't have a power antenna. That's the feed that raises and lowers it. And then looks like we have about 8 speaker wires, 2 front on each side, 2 back on each side, and more likely a ground. So what I've got to do is I've got to find all the places. These have quick connects on them, so all these were connected. All I got to do is find the correct place to connect them and try not to get my wires tangled. So I think, well, let's go with the original hot connections and ground. Maybe that green isn't a ground. I don't know what it is at this point. I have to look at the wiring diagram. So I had shoved most of these wires out of the way because they don't involve the radio. They're the harness for all the gauges and the lighting for the gauge cluster, and then this is for top windshield wipers and its light. So this is the original I don't have a wiring diagram for this, but going by memory and common sense, the yellow's got to be hot. Black is always ground, so we'll connect the power to the yellow, we'll connect the ground to the black, and that third one, that was a gray wire, so it's lighting for the original radio, like all the other dash wires are. That is gray. And then the only other connection for this is to connect the cigarette lighter jack, which is hot all the time, to that. That keeps the station presets. I'm going to just take that up since that's a connection that's got exposed hot wires on it. I don't want those grinding up and shorting out, blowing fuses, or causing other serious problems. So while I take that, I'm going to shut the camera off. I hope you got that. I got that in the frame. Okay, some more wiring of the radio. There is a plug in that harness that just plugs into the back of the radio. So once all this wiring is done, it's an easy hookup to the radio itself. But first, we have to figure out, let's go with the right front speaker. The right front speaker is fed by a blue wire and a white with blue. Well, maybe that's not the way to go. Maybe we should go. I was thinking maybe we should go by the position on here, but that's not really going to help me. So there's a white with blue. There's a blue. So these should fit the plugs that are on the speaker wires, because, and the blue is the plus, so if I can read this speaker here. The plus should be the gray with the red stripe, and that does fit into that connector. And then the white with blue hooks into the gray, which is the negative on that connector, on that speaker I should say. So the right side speaker is hooked up. Question is, should I have run that behind some of that duct work? There's plenty of slack in it, so I really don't think it matters. So let's continue on with the right rear, and I have a jumper that was taken off of my speaker bar in the back that I actually had marked with some red magic marker here, but I'm looking for a gray wire that's the positive and a gray with a black stripe that's the negative to go to the rear speaker. What I want to do with these, I want to run them back along the console because I found a grommet in the back of the console that kind of goes through the back of the back metal part behind the seat. Now, the markings in this case are now meaningless because I don't know whether I had this feed to the back on the right or the left side. So those markings are meaningless to me. Okay. There's a go with the left front, a green wire and a white wire with a red stripe. So that's obviously the green. And there's a white wire with a gray stripe. That's interesting because I don't see a white wire with a red stripe. Hold on, I just unplugged one from somewhere. I had it wired wrong. Or no. I didn't have it wired wrong. It wasn't plugged in. It was just leaning down there. So we're looking for a green and a white with a red stripe. So that one and that one. Now I need to find the speaker wire that's been in my way over here all the time. I've seen it a dozen times. There it is. And again, these are already coded for the correct connection as far as polarity is concerned because that's the only way they'll plug in. Okay. So that's the left front speaker. And then the left rear speaker, the positive is a white, and the negative is a white with gray. So I just have to make sure I don't confuse these two wires over here because they're going through the same holes. For now, I'm going to keep them on the side of the car that they belong on. You didn't see that, but I threw the end of this wire that I'm going to connect over into the driver's side, which would be the left. And they connect into a white and a white with a gray stripe. That looks like a white wire, and that's, since I used there's the white with the gray stripe. I used the wrong side, if you will, for the ones going to the back, according to my marks that I made when I put them, when I took them apart, but it's really immaterial because I have to make connectors on the back side of them anyway. So there. That's connected, and that wire's running to the driver's side of the car, the left. So that's it. The yellow wire doesn't get connected. Looks like it could use a little more tape. It doesn't need to be connected. Hide that. Oops. Lost my tape. Just need to hide that in the back of the radio somewhere. Get it out of the way. Where's that yellow wire now? I am using my big roll of tape here. If you've been following along, I picked up a tip somewhere that you should always use the biggest roll of tape you have for places where you have free access to it, because you want to get it smaller and keep a bunch of small rolls for places where you can't get a big roll in there. There's nothing worse than needing to get a roll of tape around the wire and it's way too big to fit in the space available. So that is all the wiring. We are ready to plug into the radio. Seems like I keep ending up with more and more wires to deal with in this car. So I'm going to go grab the radio. And I'm going to place it in that spot where it fits, even though I can't connect it to the can't connect it to the center gauge console yet. So I have an auxiliary jack on the back of this that I'm going to use to plug into an iPod. But I can plug in using the spacers from the knobs on the radio. Okay, that's plugged in well. Now, gotta make sure these wires all get routed in a way that'll work for them. Most of them really don't matter much because there's plenty of leeway. I just have to make sure that I can get the wires that go to the rear speakers in the rear. Now, before I do that all the way, I need to plug in my antenna. Which has a little extra wire on it because the original radio had a connection on the side of the radio. This is on the back, so I have to buy a little extension when I originally installed it. Okay, that's in, the jack's in the back. The wire for the iPod is in there. I just have to make sure I can push this far enough back so that I can work on everything else. Okay, that wire seems to be stretching. It must be routed, must be tangled on something. It seems to be getting hung up on something on the driver's side, but the passenger side seems to have plenty of room for it to go in. I have to crawl around that side, and I'm just going to shut off the camera on my way over because once I get in there to try and figure out what needs to move, I'm just going to have my head in the way. But unless I tell you differently, you can rest assured that I just had to move probably that fuse and filter box out of the way to allow it to slip in all the way.